Hello and welcome to week 5 of the weekly digital creative offerings. So I'm really excited about this week. If you've been in any of our workshops, you'll have likely touched on this before. I love it as a means to create, and we're going to be looking at story. So we're going to be looking at plot structures. There's a guy called Charles Booker who wrote a book called The 7 Basic Plot Structures, and it's not exclusive to him, this idea, but more widely there's this idea that every story will be familiar to you. It will have a thread, it will have a through line that resonates with another story, because all stories in the world can fit under these 7 basic plot structures, which I think are now 9, so clearly all of them couldn't fit into the 7 because now they've added 2. But to give you an example of what these plot structures are, they have names. So it's things like overcoming the monster, rebirth, quest, journey and return, rags to riches, tragedy and comedy. And I think the latest 2 that have been added are mystery and rebellion against the one. Now, I'm going to let you look more into that if you want to this week and do a bit of research. But just to give us some flavour of what I'm talking about, we're going to be looking at rags to riches this week, because I think it's one of the nicest ones to sort of introduce you to this idea. So when I'm talking about plot structure, it's the idea that there are almost goalposts throughout the story that get hit. And if you look at things like Cinderella, Aladdin as 2 examples, if you think about those as we go through the plot structure, you'll go, yeah, I know what you mean now, I see where that comes in. I think they're so great because essentially what it means is you can create your own with sort of a map and a formula that we know works. Universally, this works. You can't really go wrong in creating stories using plot structures. So that's your offer this week, is to have a little go at either reflecting when you're watching something on the plot structure you're finding whilst watching it or reading something, or have a go at using these goalposts, the rags to riches ones, or if you find another one online, use those to create your own story. And I'm not saying write it in full, I'm just saying you can bullet point, you can create your protagonist and bullet point what would be happening throughout the journey. So let's look at rags to riches very quickly just to give you an example. Oh, I've got an email. So rags to riches always starts with the initial wretchedness at home and the call. So our main character, our protagonist, has to be in some sort of physical, mental and or emotional squalor. This defines our hero from the beginning. It also gives us opportunity for the character to have some personal growth. It's important that this squalor that they're in is it's kind of perceptive, so it can be anything, and I suppose what I'm trying to get at is, I did a workshop once and somebody said, oh well, they're going to work in McDonald's. Okay, I can see why that person might have said that, but that's a perception based thing. We've got to set up why the character doesn't want to be working at McDonald's. It's not enough that we can rely on universally that people don't enjoy working at McDonald's, because some people might. So it's why is this character in a position where they don't like being where they are? Well, that's what's most important. They might not like working in McDonald's because secretly they're a fantastic artist, and that's going to waste. As an example, I hope that makes sense. So there's the initial wretchedness at home and the call, and again, think about perception. What might be squalor to you might not be to someone else, so how do you set it up so the character is in that squalor, and why do they find that a difficult place to be? They're in these terrible conditions, and some of which we can understand, like in Cinderella, they're terrible conditions. We all get that universally. We wouldn't want to be in that situation. So go for either the really obvious terrible conditions, we're all going to go, yeah, I don't want to be in that. Or if you're going for something a bit more naturalistic, explain why the character doesn't want to be in that situation. That's really important. So there's the initial wretchedness, and they get the call, okay? The call to leave and to set out in the world. This is the second part of it. Out into the world and the initial success. So there's some minor struggles that our hero faces, but it looks like everything is coming up roses, okay? Our hero may have already met their prince or princess and have experienced some victories that foreshadow their future success and glory, but they're not quite ready for it yet. So these successes will be short-lived. That leads us into the central crisis, part 3 of the plot structure. This is the moment where it all goes a bit Pete Tong, and some dark figure from the hero's past might return. They might be separated or lose their prince or princess in some way, either physically or emotionally. The small victories they did have already are completely stripped away, and they're at their lowest point in the story. So if we're thinking of Cinderella, she's met the prince, she's now back, she's lost her shoe, she doesn't know if she's ever going to see him again, she's in a worse position than she was because she's had a taste of being out of a situation, now she's back in it, we're at the lowest point. This leads into independence in the final ordeal, okay? So there's no more genies, no more fairy godmothers, they only have themselves, the protagonist does, to help pull themselves back up, okay? And this is where they prove their independence, they prove that they have everything within to be able to reach their goal. There's a final confrontation between whatever is standing in their way and their end goal, but it will end how we all know it ends, which is the last bit, final union, completion and fulfillment, where they get what they want. Usually this is like a prince or a princess, but I would encourage that you also look at other things that could be, okay? They get what they eventually wanted to get, they win, it's for real this time, it will stay as far as we are aware when the story ends. And those are the 5 stages of rags to riches, okay? So there's one of those breakdowns for every plot structure, and you just Google the plot structures and they come up. I'm using a website called The Write Practice, as in WRITE. I think they're fantastic, and that's the description I've just taken that from. But essentially what you can do is use that to create your own through line, to create your own story. And like I say, I'm not saying write it in full, I'm not saying write a script, I'm just saying bullet point what might happen. This might be something that you want to work on again at a different time. Rags to riches might not be your thing, something like The Quest might be. The Quest is like Lord of the Rings type sort of storyline, and they're all quite similar. You know, they have these calls to action, they have these moments of despair. I think they're great, I just love working with them. I think once you pick up on it as well, when you start watching things, you start seeing, okay, there's a pattern, it's familiar, we like that. So have a look for that this week in whatever you're watching or reading, and have a think about your own version. And that is my offer for you this week. Have fun, do some online research. Like I say, this website's great. There's so much to look at, so have a little look, familiarise yourself with the plot structures and get stuck in, and I'll see you next week.